Imagine waking up someday in one of the mansions that Jesus Christ said he was going ahead to prepare for us. You walk out into the New Jerusalem on the streets of gold, turn a corner, and you find yourself face to face with the Son of Sam killer, or perhaps the Milwaukee cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer, or one of the Manson family. Is that possible? Welcome to Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. That'll be the topic of our program today as we discuss a book that Defender Publishing calls perhaps the most important book it's ever released. It's called Redeemed, Unredeemable, When America's Most Notorious Criminals Came Face to Face with God. Our guest is the co-author of the book, Donna Howell. Donna, welcome to Skywatch TV.
Thank you.
This is a really compelling read because it really forces us as Christians into places that are uncomfortable for us. We like to think that we share the love of Jesus Christ with people that we meet, and yet this really pushes us even beyond that level of comfort. I mean, it's easy for us to forgive people that we already like and love, but David Berkowitz? Tex Watson? Let's start at the beginning here as to what inspired you to start researching their conversion stories and what it means as far as our faith in God and His mercy. You open the book with a story of a candlelight vigil that took place not far from the Skywatch TV studios in Springfield, Missouri, last February, candlelight vigil. What was that about, and how did that affect you and the Skywatch team, or the Defender Publishing team, rather? What was it that led to the genesis of the book?
Well, the candlelight vigil actually happened in the middle of the research. We were compiling research for the book, and a young girl in Springfield, Missouri was raped and murdered. And we went to the candlelight vigil of that, and several of our staff went. And getting there, leaving, observing everything, we were there for the family. We couldn't talk. Or at one point, there was a song that had broke out near the front of the march. They were singing "This Little Light of Mine," mm-hmm. and me and the co-staff that I was with, we did not sing. We couldn't. We was like choking sobs would have been the result of that.
Yeah.
We just continued to march and be in support of the family. About halfway through the march, there's some wild cheering. It was very unusual in that setting. And we looked, and it was everybody had focused on the prosecuting attorney, had been at the front of part of the march, and everybody mm-hmm. was, there were signs that they were holding that said things along the lines of, let him hang. There needs
right.
to be harsher punishments for crimes against women and children. Mm-hmm. Execute him, those kinds of things. And everybody was going really, really wild. It was a very emotionally charged place.
So it's a kind of rally that could have gone one way, just a somber gathering of people remembering a 10-year-old girl who her life ended in a brutal way and much too soon. And almost if it had turned the wrong way, a sort of vigilante setting, a mob setting.
It was very vigilante there for a minute, yeah. Mm. It was a clashing of so many different emotions at once. We didn't say a word or anything. We left, and on the way home we discussed it and thought, it's very difficult to forgive. It's very difficult to even consider forgiving mm-hmm. in that situation. And it's moments like those and it's events like those that people have to focus. They have to ask, will I or will I not consider this person forgivable or redeemable mm-hmm. more than at other times? So the purpose behind this book primarily it plays into, there's a lot of people that say, because of what I've done, I can't be forgiven. You might be able to, but after what I've done, I can't be forgiven. The book will reach them in ways that a lot of modern contemporary Christian literature will not. Mm-hmm. And it will also reach those who are looking to forgive and can't get past the hump of answering the question, how mm-hmm. do I forgive?
So the vigil took place during the research for the book. Mm-hmm. And your co-author, Tom Horn, was a pastor for many years. Was this a question, how can God love me? If you only knew what I have done, you would know that God could never love me. Was that something that he had to encounter?
He did, yeah. He was a pastor in one of the largest Christian organizations in the world for 25 years. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that he received. I think, according to what I've heard him say, that is one of the questions he received the most was, it's easy for you to say you could be forgiven, you haven't, da-da-da-da-da, but look at what I've done,
So some of the case studies that you include in the book are some of the most notorious criminals of the 20th century in the United States, people who if there was a hierarchy of evil, would be maybe, just at the tier just below Adolf Hitler, for example. Who did you select, and how did you go about communicating and interviewing these people that you include in the book?
The selections of the 7 case studies that we eventually ended up featuring was mostly based on the question, who has been claiming conversion for a very long time? What are the works of their hands? In a couple of cases, they were not, and it was mostly because they're famous. As in the case of Ted Bundy, his case was so famous, and
Yes.
there was so much debate online as to whether or not he was or wasn't. Lots of very, very heated debate and opinions. So the reason that we chose the 7 that we chose was mostly based on the idea that these are the same 7 names that everybody else struggles with, and these are several out of the 7 are the same people that have shown for a very long time, years and years, a good portion of their life now, to do good works with their hands where they are.
Some of the names in here I was not even aware had claimed a conversion experience and claimed to have accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Ted Bundy, for example. Jeffrey Dahmer, I'd heard rumors, but I did not know that was something he had claimed. Carla Faye Tucker, the so-called pickaxe killer, parent killer, Sean Sellers, 2 members of the Manson family, Tex Watkins and Susan Atkins, was not aware that they had even claimed a conversion. So some of them had kind of dropped off the radar. They had not tried to exploit their notoriety in a way to publicize their ministry. They had really been low-key about it. So how, then, were you able to kind of break through the wall that they had put around themselves or that had been put around them by the prison system to find out from them, get their stories?
The criminals, as well as the victims, the remaining family of the victims, and other people associated, as really closely associated with the cases, have very much gone off radar for years and years now. Most of them have. And in the case of David Berkowitz and Tex Watson, there have been thousands of interview invites, and they have turned every one of them down, most of them down, for a good 20 years. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that their names have been so highly exploited. They get an interview invite, and it turns into a serial killer online fan site auction. This guy touched this letter.
Yeah.
We were able to reach out to them with an invite that they had not received, that they even had said that they had never received before, which was, no, we're not defending you. We're not saying that what you did was not bad. We're not watering anything down, nor are we going into the blood and the gore of the crime scene yet again, like so many true crime genre books have done. But that we are actually approaching this from an angle that says, although we are not directly declaring that you are or are not saved or unsaved, we are presenting the evidence of your redemption story. And we're allowing the story to speak for itself. Will you work with us? And every one of them said yes, including the contemporary Christian artist Carmen.
Yes.
He was really well known for some of his music that happened in the earlier 80s. He actually agreed to work with us, and unfortunately, because of some of the chemotherapy issues that he was dealing with in his schedule at the time, we weren't able to connect with him. But we had some really big names, including, like I said, David Berkowitz, Charles Tex Watson. We had Roy Ratcliffe, who is the prison minister who worked to baptize Jeffrey Dahmer. Dr. Dorothy Otnow Lewis, who was both the psychiatric professional associated with the case of Ted Bundy, as well as Sean Sellers. We just had a lot of people that it had to have been the hand of God, because these people were not responding to anybody else.
Now, Carmen was working with Sean Sellers, correct?
He was the mentor for Sean Sellers, the pastoral mentor for Sean Sellers on death row.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that some people find it difficult to believe that God could accept them. And I want to talk in a minute about how much greater an obstacle it was for some of these people to come to that place. But one of the things that struck me about the book Redeemed, Unredeemable is how many of the people who wound up on death row for their horrific crimes had been exposed to Christianity in one form or another as young people. Where did they go wrong? If they'd heard the gospel message, why did they turn out the way they did?
I think it's the same story as many, but I think they just went really far south. There is a certain responsibility that I think that not just that parents, especially parents, hold to really explain the gospel and help them understand from as little as they until they completely can psychologically fully understand the gospel story.
Right.
But in the case of several of these people, they walked down the halls and they saw very unabashedly displayed pictures of, Jesus in Roman times up on a cross. What to them they later explained looked just like a big bloody crime scene. And it was, the world's most famous and brutal crime scene, but it's just not connecting with them that there's a reason why it's reverently displayed in a church. You wouldn't go to a church and see the Sharon Tate crime scene on a wall.
Right.
They would consider that inappropriate on so many levels, but they don't explain to a child why. It's very difficult to connect that to a toddler understanding.
How does that scene on the wall translate into the rules for living that I'm giving you when all they see are the rules?
Exactly.
They don't understand the love in between, the need for that crime scene and where we are today. Parents are called to train up our children in the way they should go, and if that explanation is not there, then all they're seeing is this bloodied, broken man and then a bunch of rules that
Exactly.
From a parent who may just be saying, do it because I said so, or else. And that was seemed to be a common thread, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, maybe I'm reading into it, but it seemed to be a common thread that there was that sense of love and family missing in almost all of these cases in their childhood. And so they went looking for other ways to fill that hole, or perhaps the hole was filled by powers, principalities, rulers of spirit that the Apostle Paul writes about. Is that a fair assessment of the background and perhaps the causes that led to these horrible crimes that they committed?
This book, it actually ended up being so many things that we were not planning for it to be. It was a book about, these 7 stories and stories of redemption. And it has actually in so many ways turned out to also be a book that is calling for parents to really pay attention and connect with their children and their nieces and their nephews and family. The connection for family and depth and relationships is so powerfully embedded and imprinted in every single person from birth, that if they don't receive a connection, a healthy family connection with a parent or a guardian or wherever they can get it, that disconnect is what removes from their psyche their value toward human life, their value towards what for these 7 people eventually became victims. And if a person can't connect with other people and family, they will connect wherever they can find it. And when you don't value your fellow man in these cases, many of them actually turned to Satanism because they became arrogant people that did not connect. They couldn't connect. They had no value system because there was never a value system for them based in humanity around them. They connected with arrogance and me, and it turned into what became the I want this because I want this mentality led to Satanism, which led to anything else that would inflate their own power inside them, and that led to some pretty dark things. But people will find the connection where they can find it. In a lot of places it will become the Anton LaVey or the Book of Satan or the Satanic Bible or whatever that will be, and it was for several of these people.
Or a perverted form of family, as in the Charles Manson family and the group that followed him. So these people basically found their way down to the very depths of human depravity. How did they manage to find their way back? For example, Susan Atkins and Tex Watson, who were members of the Manson family, participated in some of the most brutal crimes of in American history. What was it that led them out of that pit, the abyss, and at least assuming that their stories are true and accurate, what was it that led them back to believing that, for one thing, that they could be loved once they recognized what they had done, and then to accepting that love and then turning and sharing that with others?
To answer that, I will use Tex Watson specifically as an example. He he had been led down a road of so much brainwashing in this Manson cult that eventually he did come to realize that there was a connection missing between the Christ that he had followed, Manson, and the true Christ. And he wasn't interested in the true Christ. He wasn't interested in any Christ. He wasn't interested in being anything but Watson for a while after his incarceration. And he spent actually quite a bit of time in a psychiatric ward recovering from a lot of just what absolutely drove him crazy in the brainwashing and getting pulled out of that and learning, oh my gosh, this isn't God. I wasn't serving God. And that took him so far away from anything he had ever believed in that he put a wall up and said, I don't believe in any of it, leave me alone. And some years went by and he started to feel the yearning. He was very, very, very depressed in a dark place, started to pray Psalms 23. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times in the book that specific passage comes up and has such meaning in life for people. But he begins to pray that, and he begins to feel that there is a presence there with him. And it's real, and it's not Manson-like. It is real. That turns into his own yearning to want to know what is out there, and he starts to open his mind up again to the idea that it could be the real Christ. So he starts to pray, and the classic, if you're there, I'm listening, where are you? He had to go through a lot of therapy to get past that. Using him as an example, Tex Watson is only one man in a very, very brainwashed situation that represents every other case in the book. Because even those who were not involved in a cult, and you can read it case after case after case, they go through the very, very same mental breakdown, release of wanting to have anything to do with God, connection with something that they believe is supernaturally powerful that is not the Christian God, the Jesus Christ gospel that you and I are more familiar with, and then eventually they do come around to the higher power of Jesus Christ and the gospel.
Skeptics might look at the case studies here and say, well, of course these people are going to say they accepted Jesus Christ. When you're on death row, you'll say anything to get a break. How would you respond to that?
I believe that there are many people, myself included actually, prior to the research of this book, that want to consider everything that they say as a cop-out jailhouse religion and look for some reason to debunk it. There is so much to be said about the lives that they are living from incarceration and forward. So beginning with the fact that the walls of their cell is a daily reminder of what you've done. Failure, failure, failure. They get up every morning, the walls of their cell, failure, failure. It continues to go on. They don't have a distraction like you and I where we wake up and after a bad day and our guilt is bothering us, we go play Nintendo or turn on the TV or whatever. They are every single day. They're told when to eat, when to shower. They get out. Most of the time in the high security prisoners, like the prisons spoken of in this book, they're only allowed 1 hour out of their cell a day into the sunshine, and sometimes not even that. The really, really high security prisons and death row and life. So you have to keep in mind that, yes, it does seem very quick. It seems very, well, that's convenient for us to look at them and say, you killed somebody and now you're saying, Jesus Christ, where did you come up with that? But they're every single day. The only time that they are given is time to be inside 4 walls, nothing to do. That's where they live. And if there's ever a time where they're going to reflect and they're going to come around and they're going to say, okay, look at what I've done. Look at where I am at because of what I have done. Is there any hope for me? Then it's going to be there. It's going to be in a place where nothing else can distract them but from that reflection. And I will add on to the end of that to say also that I believe that is where God frequently meets people, is when they have nothing else that can pull their attention or distract them from focusing on Him.
Yeah, there's and I know we mentioned this in talking previously, there's a television show that my wife and I watched very regularly about 15 years ago called Millennium, as we were approaching the year 2000. And there was one show that kind of stood apart. It was almost comic. It was 4 demons sitting in a donut shop discussing tactics and strategies for winning souls. And one demon allows us how he doesn't really like working with serial killers. Another one says, well, if they scare you, and no, that's not what I meant at all. They wind up on death row, and that's the only place where people can still find God anymore. And sadly, there is some truth to that. As you were communicating back and forth with the subjects in the book to prepare these case studies, and by the way, it's greatly appreciated that you didn't go into the gore and the details and make this a true crime book. What were your reactions? In other words, how difficult did you find it to say, yes, I believe this is genuine, and I believe that this person responsible for the deaths of is in fact saved, and I will see this person someday in glory?
There were a lot of moments where I doubted in every single one of them, and in every single one of them, this is just my personal opinion. We never say this in the book directly. Eventually, I did come to believe that every single one of them was a legitimate conversion to Christ. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is because when you immerse yourself, and I do not suggest that anybody does, but when you immerse yourself in these stories and in what they've done and in the depth of the evil of the acts that they've committed, and then you finally pull yourself out of that and say, "Phew, that's done. Let's focus on their conversion story." You can see they're completely different people. Susan Atkins, you cannot even recognize the young girl from the mugshot when you look at the more modern of her mugshots, real close to her death. She passed away in 2009. These people, you can't even recognize them. The way that they speak in later interviews, they're not the same people. The things that they say that come out of their mouth, especially in the cases of the Manson, they were so imprinted and brainwashed in all of this. One with they're not even the same people. The tone of their voice is different. Their eyes are different. But it's not just being able to observe the difference in that. It's some of the things that they said and the ways that they approached the subject of, look at what I've done. I mean, it was so transparent. They didn't even try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes there towards the end. It was just, look at what I've done. I have no excuse. I deserve what I'm getting. And by the way, many of them said that. Many of them said, I deserve what I'm getting. The world deserves to see me in this position, and my victims deserved better than I gave them. It's just, and I just can't imagine that you can change that way unless you mean it.
Again, I will say this kind of pushed me into an uncomfortable place. I'm the father of a beautiful young lady who will be 25 years old soon. When she was in elementary school, a young girl, age 6, in a community near us, just outside St. Louis, was found in a culvert. She'd been taken while she was walking to a friend's house and killed. And it struck me that I would have been capable of some horrific things if that had happened to my daughter and I had gotten my hands on the perpetrator. What do you hope readers take away from Redeemed, Unredeemable?
The message of Christ, above and beyond anything else. The message that the reason why he died, that it is for everyone. One of the articles that Raiders recently released was called "Letter from a Killer," and I had written it from the perspective that early on in the research of this, when we were first corresponding with these criminals, we received a letter from Tex Watson, and one of the ladies who was working in the mailroom at that time, she found it and was handling it and didn't even look at whose name it was. And then she got it and she looked at it and she started shaking and sweating because, I mean, here's a letter from the man who killed Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas. And she took that and immediately went to Tom, and she came to me and she was shaking and it was just so surreal.
Yeah.
And I wrote a recent article for Raiders reflecting that. That is what our human finite minds process. That is what we think. We see a letter from a killer and we go, I got to go wash my hands. It's almost like the blood that they've shed is going to follow them even into an inanimate object that's traveled across the country.
Yeah.
And so we can't fathom what God has done for who God has done it for. But he did come simply for anyone. He said that. There's no questioning whether or not that Jesus died for everyone. and that there is redemption available for everyone. So that is the central meaning behind the book, and that is the central focus and the central purpose, and that is exactly what Tom and I both hope that anybody that reads it can take with them.
With just about a minute, what was the most surprising thing you learned in the research for Redeemed, Unredeemable? Maybe a detail or maybe a reaction of your own that surprised you?
I think Jeffrey Dahmer was probably the most surprising and the most personal of all the case studies. And when you watch the interviews from when he was first incarcerated and his later interviews, he was never the bad guy, the boogeyman that he really was in front of people. He seemed like such a nice guy. Mm-hmm. And it was very surprising to hear what he was capable of doing, and it was 10,000 times more surprising to read how he came to Christ the way that he did. And the relationship that he made with Roy Ratcliffe was the first normal human connection relationship that he made. And when he made it, what that led to.
That was a story I was very familiar with, living in the area at the time that story broke, and reading the details in the newspaper was chilling enough. That was one of the surprises that I took away from the book, too, because I had no idea. Donna Howell is co-author with Tom Horn of the book Redeemed, Unredeemable, When America's Most Notorious Criminals Came Face to Face with God. Donna, it was an honor and a pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you, Derek.
You can get a copy of Redeemed, Unredeemable at Skywatch TV. Just call the number on your screen or visit skywatchtv.com. Keep watching. We'll do our best to serve as your eyes on the wall. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.
Angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology. Conspiracy. Discovery. Special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of Skywatch TV. Special investigative report.
For generations, we've depended on science to enhance our lives here on planet Earth, but now the science that we've depended on is fundamentally transforming our world and even what it means to be human. Welcome to Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is the first of a series that we're calling Genetic Armageddon, as science rewrites the genetic code, not just of humanity, but of the creatures that the Lord has entrusted to us as stewards of his creation. In the coming weeks, you'll hear from experts such as holistic veterinarian Dr. Gene Hovey, talking about how the food that we are feeding our pets is actually rewriting their DNA. We'll also talk about how the Defense Department is researching ways to transform what it means to be human on a very basic level. Today, we'll focus on a new book which will be coming out on November 17th, along with our documentary film, Inhuman, the movie. This is a book that will shock you, it will alarm you, it may make you angry. Dead Pets Don't Lie. Our guests today, the co-authors of the book, Donna Howell and Joe Artis. Welcome.
Hi, Derek. Thanks for having us.
This, well, I'll say again, this is a book that will leave the reader angry, I think. Joe, what was it that came to your attention that led you and Donna to write Dead Pets Don't Lie?
We started writing the book after we came into some information that was quite alarming about the underhanded practices of what's going on in the commercial pet food industry. And some of the information, let me just premise right away that as we're sharing some of the things we're going to talk about in this program, I already know in advance that a lot of the viewers of this program will probably hear some of what we have to say, and their initial reaction will be very similar to the reaction that I once had when I was first learning of it, and that is, what? This can't be real, right? They can't make this stuff up, right? Would it shock you, Derek, if I told you that all across the USA, right now, in commercial chain stores, popular, huge chain stores,
The big box
stores,
right, yep,
that tons and tons of the most popular commercial pet foods on the market actually contain euthanized dogs and cats?
When we have a pet, because we've had to put down several dogs in my lifetime, and it was a difficult experience. But you're telling me that after our dogs passed through the veterinarian's office, there was a good chance that they wound up back in the food chain for other dogs and cats?
There's a very strong possibility that they're picked up by what is known as a rendering plant, a rendering company. And what these rendering companies do is they don't want to waste that opportunity to increase their bottom line. This is in fact a source of protein, okay, in the eyes of the commercial manufacturers that are making the food. So why not? Why let those opportunities to gather that meat up go to waste, right? Well, now they're relying, of course, on the fact that they've got these big television campaigns and so forth, and people have this assumption that some or many factions within the government, that there are these benevolent arms of the government that is regulating this, which again is why this whole idea sounds preposterous when you hear it up front. But the idea that the FDA or some other branch of the government is insulating them from these issues, these poisons, these disastrous meats. And of course, many people don't know this, but the chemical pentobarbital that's used when you euthanize a cat or a dog remains in the meat through the rendering process.
It survives the rendering process.
It survives the rendering process. That's right. And I've got something. We during our investigation, the investigation that Donna Howell and I did over the last couple of years, as we were compiling the information for the book Dead Pets Don't Lie, we were able to retrieve documents from the FDA directly. So the following, I'm going to read you something. This is an admission directly from the horse's mouth. The FDA not only knows this is going on, but they're not regulating it to the degree that it avoids what we're talking about right now, where these animals are not scrutinized and pulled. They're absolutely rendered and put back into the pet foods. This is an excerpt directly from the FDA. Because in addition to producing anesthesia, pentobarbital is routinely used to euthanize animals, the most likely way it could get into dog food would be in rendered animal products. Rendered products come from a process that converts animal tissues to feed ingredients. Pentobarbital seems to be able to survive the rendering process. If animals are euthanized with pentobarbital and subsequently rendered, pentobarbital could be present in the rendered feed ingredients.
So the chemical that's used to euthanize, to kill these sick animals, these aged animals, survives the process and winds up back in the What would the ingredient be called in the pet food? Crude protein?
We call it poisonous meats.
Yeah, but
yes, it absolutely survives the rendering process, and that's what I'm getting at. The FDA already knows this is happening. So when pets are euthanized at some of these shelters and vet clinics, they are then picked up by people that gather meat throughout the city. Some of this can be roadkill. Some of this, take for example, people that are raising cattle. Okay, let's say you have 1,000 cows on a cattle farm. Mm-hmm. Well, again, we don't want to waste these opportunities, right, to gather meat. Well, after all, this can be rendered and put into the protein powder that ultimately makes it into a ton of these commercial pet foods. So cattle that are diseased. The first time I ever heard the phrase food animal, okay, food animal, that's the term we're using for a lot of the animals that make it into the rendering process and then passed along into these commercial pet foods. What is a food animal? A food animal, according to the FDA, is any meat source within an animal that is not fit for human consumption. So this includes animals with cancer, visible tumors. I mean, some of this stuff is so gross, I really don't want to talk about it on television and people change the channel, but, you know, cattle that are found dead or already dying. Chickens with protrusions that have huge tumors coming off the side of their body where they are so large because of the illness that they're inflicted by, they can't even walk. I've seen video of these chickens where they're just hobbling across the ground. Well, when they're dead or after they're dead, and sometimes these animals can be found dead in a pasture 2-3 weeks later, riddled with maggots, crawling with all kinds of life form and flies and things like this. Those are picked up by people that take all of this, the euthanized pets, the unfit for human consumption animals that are coming from farms in various places. All of them are bottlenecked to a rendering company where up a conveyor belt they go into basically a mulcher, and they're ground up into what is called a protein powder, and that powder is then sold to tons. I mean, I think it would really shock people if they knew the number of popular these people have TV ads constantly promoting the health and the wellness of their commercial pet foods, and these animals are ending up all in the same vat and then sold to unsuspecting consumers who again believe that there is some benevolent insulator out there within the government that is regulating this food and keeping the world of pet food safe for them, and they don't have to do any of the thinking.
Go ahead.
It sounds like what he is saying is so sensational that it can't hardly be believed.
Yes.
The Discovery Channel did what was called the animal rendering business or something like that, where Mike Rowe, the host of Dirty Jobs, went with the Discovery Channel and actually filmed the entire rendering process at a plant. The cow that they had picked up at the beginning of the episode had been dead for at least 4 days, they said. It was, like Joe said, covered in maggots. By the time this clearly diseased meat had been taken, they discussed how it was going from point A to point Z, which is the protein powder that's carried from the plant to wherever it goes. And they admitted in that episode that it is being sold to the highest bidder. They don't care where it goes and what it's used for. But the one thing that Joe didn't mention that I think is also crucial to the rendering process is the denaturing that happens. Close to the end, it's not just the heat process that goes in. And by the way, the rendering process, the pentobarbital does survive it, as well as a lot of other nasty chemicals that are in this big vat of the raw, they call it. But one of the things that they have to do is sanitize it or denature it from some of the other things that could cause immediate harm or death or whatever. And in that, they're adding other chemicals to the process, which would never be allowed in human foods. But what it does for the pet is it makes it so that the person feeding Fido every single day has no idea these denaturing chemicals, a glorified version of bleach, if you will, just to make it simple for the viewers, is actually doing a lot more damage over time, as well as second-generation euthanasia, pentobarbital in food over time.
And understand the denaturing process changes the shape of the protein in the protein powder, which means that the bodies of our pets don't treat these proteins coming through the same way they would if they were, say, eating a fresh ground beef, for example, or a fresh fish. The protein, after it's been heated and treated, the protein shape changes, which is critical because how the body responds to protein depends on the shape.
But also, Derek, because pounds equals dollars. There is no, and again, I realize this is hard for people to accept, but during the rendering process, when these people are creating protein sources and stuff, and by the way, that's when you pick up a bag of commercial pet food and you flip it over and it says meat byproduct. That's what that means. They don't want to identify a specific meat source like chicken or beef. Byproducts means, hey, it's just a big swarm of whatever we were able to get that month from the city, who's picking up dead animals from the streets. This could include roadkill. But also, when a supermarket gets a whole delivery of, let's say, fresh fish or chicken, when those meats at the grocery store go over the expiration, those are often then also picked up by, it's convenient for the grocery stores.
Sure.
A man will show up, he'll pick up all of those expired meats, and those are also delivered to the pet food rendering companies. And when they're all coming up the conveyor belt before they get mulched, they're not opened. They're not removing the plastic. They're not taking the meat off
styrofoam tray.
Styrofoam
that
tray.
all gets ground up into
the steak. The sticker. The ink on the sticker.
Any supermarket rejects.
Any supermarket rejects.
And everything tied to it.
And again, the euthanized pets, the roadkill. A lot of these cats and dogs are still wearing their flea collars. They don't remove the ID tags. And Derek, you know that in a recent interview that we did here at Skywatch TV, Dr. Hovey said that euthanized pets, chemicals like pentobarbital, might be the least of people's worries.
This is disturbing, but this is information that we need. As Christians, you may be wondering why we're focusing on pets. Check Genesis chapter 2. The Lord made us stewards of his creation. To take dominion of the earth means to protect it, guard it, and shepherd it with care. That's why we're focusing on this, and we'll talk more with the authors of Dead Pets Don't Lie as Skywatch TV continues right after this.
Coming exclusively from Skywatch TV for a very limited time starting November 17th, 2015. When you purchase the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie from Skywatch TV, you'll receive the largest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. An unprecedented $300 in free books, audio sets, and DVDs to add to your library or to give away as gifts during this holiday season. Included in this limited time giveaway are never before offered free audio sets. Over 30 hours of the most sought after interviews in history with global experts combined on a special 2-disc volume set discussing the unfolding genetic Armageddon now underway and what you need to know to survive the future. Featuring Something Transhumanism This Way Comes, The Coming Replacement Humans, The Days of Noah, The Coming Zombie Apocalypse, Conspiracy Theory, Psychotronic Warfare. Also, for a very limited time, in addition to the never-before offered free best-selling audio sets, if you order before this special offer expires, you'll also receive the multi-part Skywatch TV special investigative report on Inhuman the documentary and Dead Pets Don't Lie, the award-winning book Forbidden Gates, Pandemonium's Engine, the best-selling DVD by dog behavior expert Joe Artis, The Natural Dog Training Method. The breakthrough book for pet enthusiasts everywhere, Do Our Pets Go to Heaven? 2 additional mystery books with a $40 value. And if you're one of the first 3,000 customers to place your order during this limited time offer, you will also receive, absolutely free, the groundbreaking WorldNet daily film, The Last Pope, featuring Tom Horn. Place your order beginning November 17th, 2015. Altogether, the never-before offered free 6 full audio series on a 2-disc volume set plus the 5 free books and 2 additional DVDs total an astounding $300 giveaway to add to your library or to give away as gifts during this holiday season. So it's urgent that beginning November 17th, 2015, you order the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie for only $39.95 to also receive the largest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. But please understand this offer will end without notification and is on a first-come, first-served basis starting November 17th. So be sure to visit skywatchtv.com to follow the countdown to the greatest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. Order the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie for only $39.95 to also receive the largest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. Coming this November.
I'm not sure that the world is ready to receive this.
Tom Horn, Joe Ardis, Donna Howell, and the Skywatch investigation team join a host of global experts in the conclusion of a multi-year undercover inquiry that exposes what the U.S. government, the FDA, and monster corporations have been hiding from you.
We're talking about everything from the food that we eat to animals and pet animals to ultimately humans. Literally, what we have been doing with genetically modified crops, what we have and are doing with transgenically made animals, we fully intend to do with the human race. I mean, how many people know right now that the last scientist in Congress, Bill Foster, recently spoke before Congress. He wrote an article for The Hill in which he says that right now the top science departments in our government that dole out taxpayer-funded revenue have already been ordered to literally create the guidelines that are going to be used for genetically modifying the human race.
I think 90% of Americans would be shocked if they learned that their cats and dogs were eating these diseased meats and euthanized pets.
During our investigation, we were able to verify that if your pet Fluffy had been euthanized at one of these vet clinics or one of these shelters, it would be recycled into food byproducts, toothpaste, cosmetics, deodorant.
The stench is overwhelming. It's unbelievable.
Coming in November, an unprecedented, official, and imposing undercover report that exposes what government agencies and greedy corporations are hiding about a genetic menace that is slowly, quietly, secretly killing and transforming all of creation.
They have made a Faustian deal with the devil. I'm talking about our government. They have sold out the best interest of Americans to greedy monster corporations that are in their back pockets.
Coming this November exclusively from Skywatch TV. Dead Pets Don't Lie. Inhuman the documentary. Survive the Future.
Our series Genetic Armageddon continues on Skywatch TV as we continue looking at the ways science is fundamentally transforming the world around us as we continue our conversation with the co-authors of the new book, Dead Pets Don't Lie, Joe Ardis and Donna Howell. Joe, you left us just before the break. Dr. Gene Hovey, holistic veterinarian that you interviewed for the book, made the comment that what we've been talking about in the first half of the program, that the pentobarbital to euthanize pets, making it into the food chain, maybe the least of pet owners' worries?
That's right. I want to share something that we retrieved from the FDA. We were able to retrieve documentation that, in their own words, they not only acknowledge this is happening, but they're not regulating it out of existence. Pentobarbital, the idea that a pet would, because I can see certain pet owners that might feel like, well, you know, if a dog eats a euthanized dog, I mean, wouldn't that happen in the wild? Wouldn't a wolf find another dead wolf or something like that and maybe eat them?
But not one that's been poisoned to death.
But not one that's been poisoned to death, that's been through the denaturing process where chemicals have bleached the meat, now rendered into with styrofoam trays and dead cattle and maggots and all of these other things. But let me share a couple of the, and this is very popular. This is not a conspiratorial thing. This is not just only if you go to a farm feed store and you find some obscure brand. I'm talking about big commercial chains. A ton of those pet foods are being preserved for unnaturally long shelf lives to help the person manufacturing it improve their bottom line. It gives them a larger window in which to sell the food. They're being preserved with chemicals that are just absolutely outrageous. They're devastating. The ramifications are devastating to the pet. And again, this is directly from some of the resources we were able to pull from the FDA. One chemical, I'm going to give you a couple examples of dozens. Propylene glycol, used in pet foods to stabilize moisture, inhibit bacterial growth, maintain texture, and used as a sweetener. Okay, so that the pet is like, wow, this tastes really good. I'm wildly excited about it. It is largely considered one of the most dangerous preservatives in pet foods. It also happens to be a well-known ingredient in antifreeze.
I was going to say, that sounded familiar, and that's why we're told when you've got antifreeze around to keep it away from pets, because the sweet taste will attract them and
that's right.
Kill them.
That's right. But see, when a person buys pet food and they take it home to see if Fluffy enjoys it, and Fluffy's just so ravenous about it, you know, animals are going to often eat based on smell. and taste. So they're going to eat this stuff ravenously, and it's going to leave the person who bought the pet food with this impression, well, this must be a good one. It is known to cause illness in canines, can inhibit growth of an animal's good bacteria. This is why a lot of people will take probiotics. Can cause blockage or cancerous lesions in the intestines because of its use in moisture control. Considered to cause the most overlooked issues in canine health, including itching, dryness of skin. I saw that a lot. And do see it a lot when I'm in the field working with canines, various clients. You see that a lot. Dryness of skin, and you often find that they're feeding these cheap commercial dog foods. Dehydration, hair loss, anemia, and irregularities in the mouth, teeth, and gums, listed as GRAS by the FDA.
Generally regarded as safe.
Generally regarded as safe.
Generally recognized as safe.
Let me give you another really quick example. This is going to blow your mind. TBHQ is another very popularly used preservative in pet food, used as a preservative as well as an ingredient in explosives, varnishes, resins, and lacquers. And I don't mean to sound condescending, I really don't. It's just that I almost, as I'm reading this material directly from the FDA, I mean, it leaves me with this impression that, is there no limit? Is there seriously no limit to what they will allow to be used in commercial pet foods? Contains petroleum-derived butane, links to precancerous stomach tumors in labs, can cause damage to your DNA, considered safe by the FDA for use in pet food.
Yeah, and as we talked, we found out from Dr. Hovey that a recent study showing that dogs have expressed more genes that allow them to process carbohydrates, enzymes that allow them to process carbohydrates. It's not necessarily dogs were created to eat corn-based kibble. It's because we've been feeding them corn-based kibble. We're changing their DNA to adapt to the food that we've been given.
That's right.
Yeah. Donna, speaking of how long this can go on and how much is allowed, there's a chapter in the book called The Pass the Buck Regulation Game. What do you mean by that?
There's kind of a game of finger pointing that goes on in the pet food industry. The only regulatory authority, period, is the FDA. But let's say that, you know, John Smith decides that he wants to start a pet food company. He goes to the FDA and says, what is required? Straight off the FDA website, it's cited several times in the book, there is no pre-market approval necessary. Absolutely no pre-market approval required by the FDA.
Really?
You can see it on their website. So John Smith says, well, if I don't need anything from the FDA, what are they at least suggesting I follow? The FDA points a finger at both the PFI, the Pet Food Institute, and AFCO. So John Smith goes to these two different websites and says, okay, what is required of me? What do I got to do? The first thing that both AFCO and PFI say at the top of their website is we don't have any regulatory authority. We exist to create really, really high standard suggestion laws. We suggest that you follow these. We really hope you do, because if you follow all of these little laws and policies and regulations as far as, you know, the high standards of pet food, this is going to be your healthiest food. So John Smith says, okay, thank you, AFCO, for your suggestion, but if it's not regulated, I'm not going to follow that because I'm John Smith and I'm going to cut corners. So forget you, AFCO. What does PFI say? Same exact thing as AFCO. But all the while, FDA is saying you really need to be following these guys over here. So it's just a finger pointing game. It continues to go round and around and around. Finally, John Smith says, look, I don't have to follow what AFCO says. I don't have to follow what PFI says. The FDA says that there is not a pre-market approval standard. So there really is no regulation prior to the market, and it isn't until a pet gets hurt that somebody would have to step in and regulate.
As in the case some years ago where ingredients coming from China contained melamine and dogs began to die. With just a couple of minutes left, what do people do? How do we educate ourselves so that we aren't feeding our pets poison?
Yes, thank you for asking that, Derek. I want to make it very clear to the people watching this program that Dead Pets Don't Lie was a very serious multi-year investigation, but it's not just a book with tons and tons and tons, and it's not only limited to all of this terrible news. We knew when we took on this writing project that people would want to know, what can we do? We're not fatalist about this. There are things that a person can absolutely do to dramatically reduce the number of poisons and things, if not completely eliminate the poisons and the toxins that their pet is being exposed to. And if I may, let me just share just a few, and we're just going to skim the surface with this very broad stroke, but for somebody watching the program that wants to know where they can start immediately today. Number one, when you look at a pet food bag, flip it over, look at the label, and make sure that it doesn't say anywhere byproducts.
Or meat and bone meal.
Meat and bone meal. Avoid those like the plague. If you see poultry byproduct, meat byproduct of any kind, avoid that bag completely. Try to steer away from pet foods that use primary ingredients like corn and various grain types. The other thing you can do is go on the web. Type in the name of the brand you're considering and look for recalls associated with that brand. You'll often find that a lot of popular commercial foods have been pulled off the markets for various salmonella outbreaks and things like this where they've been pulled back in. There are good brands out there that do not have recalls associated with it. When you're doing research, talk to a smaller boutique-style pet store. Go into a place where you're going to get more of a mom and pop shop. I have found that you get more educated type information as opposed to the big commercial type pet stores. And finally, look for bags that on the label read the ingredient sources that have been used, read like prairie raised or free range chicken and beef. And typically
wild caught fish.
That typically means that they're free range, that they're eating things that are native to what they should be eating. Cattle eating grass, chicken eating seed, and not being fed things like cattle, being fed things like genetically modified corn and then being turned around and rendered into pet food.
It's startling, it's stunning, and frankly, it's infuriating that this is allowed to go on. Dead Pets Don't Lie, an important new book from Donna Howell and Joe Artis, be released on November 17th, and along with Inhuman, the next and final phase of man is here, documentary film from Skywatch TV. Part of our series on genetic Armageddon. Science can be used for good things, but it can also be used to fundamentally transform God's creation. We thank you for watching. As we keep watch, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.
Angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology. Conspiracy. Discovery. Special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of Skywatch TV. Special investigative report.
The foods that we're feeding our pets may be killing them. This is Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. We're in the middle of an investigation called Genetic Armageddon, how the science that we depend on to enhance our lives is fundamentally transforming the world around us. This coincides with the release of our documentary film Inhuman on how the transhumanist movement wants to rewrite the genetic code of humanity. But it also coincides with a book that I think is one of the most important that I've read in recent years, Dead Pets Don't Lie. It is a look at how what we are feeding our pets may not be what we think and how it's affecting their health. In studio with us today are the co-authors of this new book, investigative journalist Donna Howell and canine behavior specialist Joe Artis. Welcome.
Thank you, Derek.
In our previous discussion, we talked about the rendering process and how this crude protein or this meat byproduct or bone meal that goes into what our pets eat is created at these rendering plants and includes things that we would never imagine, like out-of-date meats from grocery stores, roadkill, diseased animals that die from natural causes or die prematurely before they're actually led to slaughter, things that we would never allow into the human
Right.
food chain. Chemicals that we would never allow. Euthanized pets making it into pet foods. This is some pretty startling information, Donna, and you actually extracted some of this information from the rendering plants. How did you go about getting this information, and how difficult was it to find out what these rendering plants actually do?
Well, there is this very thick red tape line around everything. They are very secretive. They do not like to talk about what goes on behind their doors. In one specific instance, I was able to connect with one of the largest rendering plants in the U.S., and that is one of the interviews that's included within the book, but there were several others. In this particular case, when I called, I had some questions I asked the first several people that I was able to get in touch with. They kept kind of, passing me around and giving me the runaround. Finally, I got a hold of somebody that completely, she stopped up. There was dead silence on the other end of the phone. At one point, it sounded like she was whispering. She didn't know how to answer my questions. My questions were such as, once these pets are euthanized at these surrounding shelters and they're collected and they're taken to your rendering plant, they are, in fact, rendered into a protein powder, correct? Most of the time, the answer to that question was, well, sure, we render them, we turn them into protein powder. Not an ounce of surprise in anybody's voice at this point. But then, what is that protein powder? Where does it go? What is it turned into? What does it do? Does it show up in future generation pet food? And at one point, the line completely went dead. I was told to hold, and then the line went dead.
Oh, just an accident,
So,
I'm sure.
Lines go dead sometimes. So I called back, and they told me to hold on, and they put me through to somebody who came in, I'm assuming from some kind of a legal department, who is, prepared for those kinds of questions. I had to hold on hold for a while.
Well, when they recognized that it was her, it's like, oh, it's her again. There was this shuffling, and then a new person was introduced.
Right.
And introduced herself.
And this gal named Christina, she was very, very upbeat and friendly, very hi. And so when I gave her the questions, is this what's happening with the pets? Actually, that powder is sold internationally to places like China. Now, she was very, very rehearsed in her answers.
Public relations expert, likely.
And it was almost like she repeated the same thing. Like, okay, so where did you say that they're sending? These are sent to places like China. And then my next question, what do they do? Where is this product ultimately going? Let's get to the bottom line. I was very nice, but let's get to the bottom line. What is it being used for? And then she answers, we are told to say that they are being used for things like fertilizer. And I said, hang on. You are being told to say that they are being used for things like fertilizer? And she says, we are being told to say that they are being used for things like fertilizer. And I said, well, with all due respect, if you are being told what to say and it's going internationally, how can we trust that that's really what it's being used for? Then she gets kind of quiet for a minute. She stumbles over her words a couple times. She didn't have a rehearsed answer for that one.
Trying to find the right spot on the flow chart. If then this.
Right. The rebuttal. Well, there wasn't a rebuttal for that one, and she finally just said, "That's true. We don't really know." And that's the whole conversations in the book. But ultimately, the red tape, it goes so high, and then you just don't get the answer you're looking for.
Well, we spent a lot of time in the previous program talking about some of the surprising things, shocking things that go into these powders or whatever that comes out of the rendering plant, and what then gets put into the pet food that our cats and dogs are eating. How is this affecting the health of our animals? I mean, we've got a dachshund that is the best dog we've ever had, and he's getting a little gray. He's like me. He's got the gray on the sides of the muzzle. He's 15 years old. How is Sam's health being affected by this off-the-shelf, store-bought pet food?
Well, it kind of depends on what you're feeding him, Derek. So,
it's probably not the recommended stuff. I mean, he's got a certain brand that he likes, and he always likes it, and it's the stuff that looks like, cheeseburger.
Sure.
But in generally speaking, how is the health of cats and dogs being affected by these chemicals that are making their way into their food stream?
Well, in the last 15 years, we've seen a huge increase in what vets call mystery illnesses or rare diseases. When they simply can't explain why, let's say, a 6-month-old German Shepherd dies of stomach cancer. It simply defies any of the data that was gathered in previous generations before things like some of the chemicals we talked about in the previous program were introduced to using for preservatives. Okay, so there's the introduction of unnatural chemistry that's happening so that this food has a longer shelf life in which to sell. But I think we have to look at diet, because it isn't just stomach cancer, and that's not just an isolated case. Kidney failure. Okay, the dyes that are used. When you pick up a commercial bag of pet food, for example, and you look at it, you'll often see, and a lot of the main popular, big, colossal brand pet foods, you'll see a picture of a guy in a lab coat smiling. Well, this is almost certainly an actor that's placed on the bag to incite to the person looking at it that this food is recommended by a veterinarian.
Right.
You know, people feel more confident about buying a product when they see a picture of a guy in a lab coat.
A white lab coat conveys authority.
It does. But we have to look at diet because the data is staggering. The number of mystery illnesses and undiagnosed deaths is 3 times what it was in previous generations. And the number of cases of stillbirths, kidney failure at less than a year of age.
And the more that these things are coming up in the veterinary circles, the more the veterinaries look at this and go, well, that's really common actually in this breed or that breed.
That's right. That's the other thing, is that our expectations for things like the length of life are dropping, and that becomes the new normal based on what people are feeding their pets. Now, I want to say very clearly, I don't want any part of these programs to come off as though I'm inciting in any way that vets are the bad guys.
No.
You know, it's like Dr. Jean Hovey, who's going to be a guest in an upcoming program during this investigation in this series of programs. She even talks about when she went through veterinary school, receiving 2 hours of credited training by an individual who, we won't name the brand, but from a large commercial pet food brand, was the guy issuing the training. So he comes in under one of the big umbrellas from one of the big commercial pet foods, and he's the guy that's giving them their 2 credited hours of training on what nutrition should look like in pet food.
Yeah, and more than that, she pointed out that these major pet food manufacturers are actually funding chairs in the major veterinarian schools here in the United States. So the nutrition chair is funded by a company that's got a vested interest in the nutritionist finding that their food is recommended for your dog or cat.
That's also true with like kickback programs. Now, again, not every vet that has an incentive to sell you a particular pet food where he receives like at the end of 30 days, he gets a kickback check. Not every one of these people is a part of some big grand global conspiracy. But the fact is, unless they self-educate, a lot of vets do not have the required knowledge to then make a recommendation on what pet foods to feed your pet.
Because they are trained in treatment.
That's right.
They're not trained in prevention.
That's right. As a society, and you see this in people as well, as a society, we're moving further and further away from holistic approaches to curing various things. Okay? Diabetics, for example, might develop diabetes. Some people have diabetes because of their diet. They develop diabetes over their lifetime to eating the wrong foods, lack of exercise, things like this. Well, often they'll see their doctor, and their doctor will say, we're going to give you a pharmaceutical response to a problem that your body is suffering under, instead of a holistic answer to pursuing the cure. So instead of using what God has outlined for the body in the first place, exercise, eating the right foods, they're going to give you pharmaceutical drugs that mask and deal with symptoms, right? It's the same thing in the animal kingdom. Pharmaceutical treatments to things that really often can be dealt with if better choices are made in terms of diet.
It's shocking, but important information. As we Christians are stewards of God's creation, we have a responsibility to do what's best for them because they can't choose for themselves when they're under our care. Our series, Genetic Armageddon, continues with the co-authors of Dead Pets Don't Lie on Skywatch TV right after this.
Coming exclusively from Skywatch TV for a very limited time starting November 17th, 2015. When you purchase the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie from Skywatch TV, you'll receive the largest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. An unprecedented $300 in free books, audio sets, and DVDs to add to your library or to give away as gifts during this holiday season. Included in this limited time giveaway are never-before offered free audio sets. Over 30 hours of the most sought-after interviews in history with global experts combined on a special 2-disc volume set discussing the unfolding genetic Armageddon now underway and what you need to know to survive the future. Featuring Something Transhumanism This Way Comes, The Coming Replacement Humans, The Days of Noah, The Coming Zombie Apocalypse, Conspiracy Theory, Psychotronic Warfare. Also, for a very limited time, in addition to the never-before-offered free best-selling audio sets, if you order before this special offer expires, you'll also receive the multi-part Skywatch TV special investigative report on Inhuman the documentary and Dead Pets Don't Lie, the award-winning book Forbidden Gates, Pandemonium's Engine, the best-selling DVD by dog behavior expert Joe Artis, The Natural Dog Training Method. The breakthrough book for pet enthusiasts everywhere, Do Our Pets Go to Heaven? 2 additional mystery books with a $40 value. And if you're one of the first 3,000 customers to place your order during this limited time offer, you will also receive, absolutely free, the groundbreaking WorldNet daily film, The Last Pope, featuring Tom Horn. Place your order beginning November 17th, 2015. Altogether, the never-before-offered free 6 full audio series on a 2-disc volume set plus the 5 free books and 2 additional DVDs total an astounding $300 giveaway to add to your library or to give away as gifts during this holiday season. So it's urgent that beginning November 17th, 2015, you order the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie for only $39.95 to also receive the largest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. But please understand this offer will end without notification and is on a first-come, first-served basis starting November 17th. So be sure to visit skywatchtv.com to follow the countdown to the greatest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. Order the new documentary film Inhuman and the companion book Dead Pets Don't Lie for only $39.95 to also receive the largest giveaway in Skywatch TV history. Coming this November.
I'm not sure that the world is ready to receive this.
Tom Horn, Joe Artis, Donna Howell, and the Skywatch investigation team join a host of global experts in the conclusion of a multi-year undercover inquiry that exposes what the U.S. government, the FDA, and monster corporations have been hiding from you.
We're talking about everything from the food that we eat to animals and pet animals to ultimately humans. Literally, what we have been doing with genetically modified crops, what we have and are doing with transgenically made animals, we fully intend to do with the human race. I mean, how many people know right now that the last scientist in Congress, Bill Foster, recently spoke before Congress. He wrote an article for The Hill in which he says that right now the top science departments in our government that dole out taxpayer-funded revenue have already been ordered to literally create the guidelines that are going to be used for genetically modifying the human race.
I think 90% of Americans would be shocked if they learned that their cats and dogs were eating these diseased meats and euthanized pets.
During our investigation, we were able to verify that if your pet Fluffy had been euthanized at one of these vet clinics or one of these shelters, it would be recycled into food byproducts, toothpaste, cosmetics, deodorant.
The stench is overwhelming. It's unbelievable.
Coming in November, an unprecedented, official and imposing undercover report that exposes what government agencies and greedy corporations are hiding about a genetic menace that is slowly, quietly, secretly killing and transforming all of creation.
They have made a Faustian deal with the devil. I'm talking about our government. They have sold out the best interest of Americans to greedy monster corporations that are in their back pockets.
Coming this November exclusively from Skywatch TV. Dead Pets Don't Lie. Inhuman the documentary. Survive the future.
Genetic Armageddon, science rewriting what it means to be alive on planet Earth, part of God's creation. I'm Derek Gilbert. We're talking with the co-authors of the new book, Dead Pets Don't Lie, Joe Artis and Donna Howell. We've talked a lot about the failure of the regulatory system to preemptively protect our pets. What does the FDA do when something comes along that we can demonstrate is harmful to our pets? Or how much evidence does it take for the government to step in and fix a problem?
Going back to what I had said when we spoke before about John Smith and his company, that he just starts without any pre-market approval. Let's say that his food makes a lot of animals sick. A person coming to the FDA and saying, you're the regulator, you're responsible for making sure that my dog or cat is going to be okay, and Fluffy and Fido are both dying because of as a result of this food. What are you going to do about this? The FDA's response is, in every situation, we would love to help you with that. We'll get right on it. We just need a few things. First, we need a chemical analysis of the food that you have been feeding your pet. And a chemical analysis has to come out of your pocket. You're entirely responsible for making that happen. So all the scientists that you have in your Rolodex, go find one and make the call. I mean, seriously, coming up with a chemical analysis from the FDA. They're not interested in helping you get that information. The second thing that they're going to need is a veterinary paper trail from the beginning of the onset, symptom onset for the illness of the animal. They want to be able to prove that this is something that's going to point back to the food that you're complaining about. Now, as Joe mentioned earlier, that's a little bit difficult, and it's kind of in a shady gray area because veterinarians, by the way, they are not the bad guys, but a lot of them, they are trained to cure, but not to prevent. And their knowledge of pet nutrition and rendering plants and all these horrible chemicals that go into the food in the first place, unless they're really holistic and they do a lot of self-training past the point of their own veterinary education certification program, unless they do that and they go beyond that, they don't think to connect the dots from Fido is sick to it's the food. They think, oh, let's see, what breed is Fido? Oh, that's right, he's one that falls into this, he's going to have this rare disease, and it's becoming more common. So the paper trail that you have to get for the FDA from your vet has to point back to the food being the problem. And a lot of times you're not going to get that pointing back that direction from the vet. Between these two, it has to prove that it's the food that is the problem. Now, here's where it goes to the third kind of tier. Yeah. Once you have paid all this astronomically high expensive testing and blood tests, urinalysis, you have to be able to prove that it's the food. Once you've got that and you go back to the FDA and you say, here you go, the FDA, at some point there's a mediation where this monster corporation is willing to pay you a lot of money out of court to keep your mouth shut. And this has been documented in a lot of court cases that are really, really hard to find. But if you read into it and you really look into it, you'll see that there have been a lot of out-of-court cases where people are paid to be quiet. So it only goes so far anyway, and the monster corporation is still, despite all the urinalysis, blood tests, chemical analysis of the food, the veterinary, despite all of that, they are still allowed to continue their poor practice within the food industry, and the FDA never really had to do anything about it.
Because they settled out of court, the FDA doesn't say you have to pull your food from the market and change the formulation. Basically, because it's settled out of court, the FDA says, okay, as far as we're concerned, this problem is solved.
Well, the FDA doesn't have any reason to spend its money, resource, time, talent, and energy pulling something from the market if they say, okay, guys, we're about to get in the middle of this. How's it going? And then everybody says, never mind.
We've settled out of court. These people got their money. They can go buy a new dog, and everybody's happy. And all the other poor dog and cat owners out there are still stuck thinking that what they're feeding their pet is helpful.
Yeah.
Besides health issues, Joe, as a canine behavior specialist, how do you see this affecting the behavior? I mean, the old saying, we are what we eat.
Right.
I presume the same thing holds true for our pets.
Sure.
How is this affecting dog behavior?
Sure. I won't name brands, but I've been in a lot of homes dealing with the kinds of dogs that a lot of traditional trainers don't want to deal with, particularly aggression and things like this. The ones that aren't suitable, example, for dog training class, okay? The ones basically that are on the brink of being euthanized. Food isn't to blame for every single one of these cases, but often what I have found is when a dog is labeled by the owner stupid or unfocused or scatterbrained or stubborn. When I've looked at what is being fed, you can see, missing pieces of fur. You can see the attention span might be being affected by the fact that it's a grain-based food, which is totally not native to what a canine should be eating in the first place.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, it's no different than if you put a child. I love Dr. Hovey's Spaghetti-O example that you'll be seeing soon on another up-and-coming program. But it would be like if you put a child on nothing but ice cream. Well, that child would probably live for a while on ice cream, right? But what's it going to do to the child's attention span? What's it going to do to the child's mood? Is he going to receive instructions from parents? Is he going to behave in a way that's conducive to the kind of life they want to build? It's no different with our pets. So when your pet is giving you all of these visual symptoms of irritability and missing pieces of fur and scratching and moaning and pawing, it's amazing to me that oftentimes food is like the last thing on a person's checklist. We've tried everything. We went to YouTube. We looked at training videos. We hired a trainer. This dog just doesn't pay attention. I'll give you a perfect example. And of course, we talk about this in the book, but a man named Shane calls me in. He's got a 12-year-old dog. The dog is wrapped in a sweater. I said, why is the dog wrapped in a sweater? He says, well, without the sweater, the dog eats through the skin and begins to pick and, kind of piecemeal and chomp away the skin. He's very irritated. And we've been told that it's a mystery allergy, which, by the way, is probably mycotoxins making its way into the pet food in the first place. Different subject, but molds with these cheap grains where they're stored for a really long time, often they'll end up with what's called a grain mite. Grain mite is like a sister mite to the dust mite. But grain mites move these mold spores. Grains are stored inappropriately. They're succumb to things like moisture. So the grains end up with mold spores and grain mites, which ultimately gives rise to microfungi and what are called mycotoxins, which, by the way, is deadly.
And it doesn't look like a bread loaf when it molds. I mean, this is all completely naked.
Right. It's invisible to the naked eye. But in any case, not to get off point here, but the point is that a lot of these grain, and it was a grain-based food is why I bring this up, but that is one of the largest contributors to hair loss, skin irritability, and it's almost always labeled by a veterinarian as a mystery allergy. Well, we don't know. It could be a mystery allergy. I looked at what this person was feeding. This was a man with means. He had plenty of money, but he's a perfect example of someone who walks into a commercial store and just makes a selection based on what they're being told or what bag looks like the dog they own. And I looked at it very briefly and I said, this is a very cheap, grain-based food, probably riddled with mycotoxins. This is going to create the mystery allergy that your vet is talking about. Try a grain-free, much higher-end feed. He made the change and he emailed me like 2 weeks later and he said, we've taken the sweater off. No, and by the way, this guy had paid his vet for topical ointments, pharmaceutical antibiotics that he was taking orally. He was administering to the dog orally to deal with the external symptoms of infection. So the amount of money that he saved immediately making a better choice with diet, and of course what's way more important is the quality of the life for this poor animal. I mean, imagine having a skin rash and being wrapped in a wool, or a potato sack and then being told, just, we want to train you, pay attention, I'm talking. You see what I'm getting at? So in many, many, many ways, quality food can make astronomical impacts to the behavior of an animal. And shockingly, when you look at feeding portions and doing it at the right times of the day, it's almost zero additional dollars. So I just want viewers to know, if they're thinking this is a huge astronomical leap in expense, it's not. You'll save money on vet visits, you'll save money on pharmaceuticals, and so forth.
And coming up on Skywatch TV as part of our continuing investigative series, Genetic Armageddon, we talk with holistic veterinarian Dr. Gene Hovey and some new research that's come out about genetic changes in dogs, apparently resulting from generations of feeding them corn-based products. The new book, Dead Pets Don't Lie, Joe Artis and Donna Howell, available November 17th. Thank you both for your work, your research. This is important information. November 17th is the date the book will be available also at that time. Inhuman, the documentary, a movie about the transhumanist movement and its implications for human genetics and the transformation that scientists want to make in God's creation as far as what it means for you and me to be humans. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV. The supernatural realm is real, and we humans are naturally curious about it. That's why there are so many television reality shows featuring ghost hunters and alien chasers and mediums and psychics. Now, by definition, we Christians believe in the supernatural, and yet most churches avoid these controversial topics. Our mission here at Skywatch TV is to address these topics of the paranormal and the supernatural from a biblical perspective. This is, after all, the authoritative book on the subject. But we depend on your help to do it. To find out more on how you can support Skywatch TV, prayerfully and financially, log on to our website, skywatchtv.com. Our mission also to keep you informed through news items we think are important and the latest news updates about Skywatch TV. You can follow those on the internet, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, various other places. And of course, all of our programs, if you can't watch them live, are archived at our website and our official YouTube channel. You can find all the places where you can see Skywatch TV and follow us on the internet at skywatchtv.com/web. And of course, you can watch our programming anytime, day or night, on demand through Roku. For instructions on how to add our Roku channel to your Roku account, log on to skywatchtv.com/Roku. And keep watching as we keep watch at Skywatch TV.